Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Business. I'm Kay Miller, also known as Muffler Mama. I've been the #1 salesperson in a male-dominated industry, a successful entrepreneur for over 30 years, and now my mission is to help you build a business and brand nobody else can compete with. If you're ready to break out of the pack and create your own uncopyable advantage, stay tuned. My guests and I are here to help. My guest today is Leslie Lautenslager, an internationally recognized expert in diplomacy and protocol. Leslie's the author of My Time with General Colin Powell, Stories of Kindness, Diplomacy, and Protocol. In this episode, she shares personal insights on her 25 years spent at the side of one of America's greatest public servants, General Colin Powell. Leslie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited that Patricia Fripp, we call her Fripp, is such a connected to people in high places like you.
She's charming and delightful, so I'm delighted to be here.
She is, and I was delighted to read your book, which I'm holding up, and this interview will be on YouTube as well as all the podcast platforms. So the title is My Time with General Colin Powell, Stories of Kindness, Diplomacy, and Protocol. One thing I want to point out, and this is really, I want you to talk more than me. I like to talk, but you call him my general, and you two developed such a great friendship and that respect. And, it went way beyond a work relationship. His whole family has taken you in. I mean, a lot of the testimonials to the book came from his family. So you were just such an important part of his life, and of course, vice versa. So let's see how we can dive into this because, as I mentioned, it's a little overwhelming. You have done so much, and it's been a pleasure to get to know more about you and of course, General Powell. So let's talk about your background. Where did you start, and how did you get to be involved in protocol?
I am actually the best example of being at the right place at the right time and friend of a friend type of thing. When I landed the job, in my first job in protocol 1,000 years ago, 1986. So it was after, like one of the first jobs after my first job out of college. A friend called out of the blue and said, Leslie, this job, it's got your name on it. It's at the Department of State and the Office of Protocol. And at that point, I'm not even certain I knew what protocol was. I was a double major in college, psychology and fine arts, which means that I can either psychoanalyze my own paintings or I can design my own ink blots, basically. But my friend had a friend at the State Department working for the Chief of Protocol of the United States, who was Ambassador Lucky Roosevelt. And there was a position that had opened up, and they were desperately, the Office of Protocol staff and Ambassador Roosevelt specifically, desperately needed to hire somebody to fill the position. And they spread the word around the staff, saying, who do you know and whatnot. And so somebody on the staff had a friend who was my friend, and my friend, God bless her, thought to recommend me based on nothing more exotic than the fact she'd spent a lot of time with me, with my family. And I was raised very much by a good Southern mother. And, I say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, and thank you, and I write my thank you notes. I mean, everything you can imagine that comes from the epitome of proper raising.
Good breeding.
Good breeding. And my friend thought of me, and thank goodness that she did. And I went in for an interview, and lo and behold, I got the position, was offered the job, and within weeks of being in the job, fell in love with the profession. And suddenly I had found my niche, and that became my passion and my career. Now, at the time, it was a political appointment. So my first position in the protocol world was a political appointee during the Reagan administration. So that meant that my position itself ended when President Reagan's administration ended. Although I stayed for a few months to help train the President Bush 41 administration, but that was the end of my first job in protocol, but it became my career. And so from that, I went on and did protocol for private organizations and whatnot. But it became my career, and my career is as a protocol professional, and fell in love with it. Fell in love with the fact that protocol is an art and a science. So you learn the rules, and you know what is correct. And that's the science of protocol. But the art of protocol is you learn those rules, but then you know how to justify bending the rule or breaking the rule.
Or maybe finessing the rule.
Finessing the rule. You know, one of the examples that I give that's the most obvious lesson to show the art and the science of what protocol is, just as an example. You know, if the place of honor is always to the right, and for your listeners and your viewers who may not know a lot about protocol, and you may not know this, but the place of honor, when you are walking somebody someplace or you're seating somebody someplace, the place of honor is to the right. So if you are the host and you have a guest of honor, you would put the guest of honor to your right. Or when you're walking with that guest of honor down a hallway, you would walk with the guest of honor on your right. That's the science. That's the black and white rule. Okay, but what happens if you are deaf in your right ear and your guest of honor is deaf in his left ear? Now, is that going to be the kindest thing you would want to do? Put your guest of honor at a disadvantage? So if you think of protocol as also a gift, it's a gift you're giving those you're honoring. It's a gift you are giving as you are trying to build relationships between organizations, between leaders, between cultures, between countries. Think in terms of, yes, the rules that are meant to be followed, because it provides a framework so that everybody can walk forward together. Theoretically, symbolically walk forward together or develop a relationship moving forward. But know when it's okay, know when it's appropriate to bend a rule so that it's the gift you're giving. So again, going back to my analogy of deaf in right ear, deaf in left ear, think of it as a gift you're giving that person to not put them at a disadvantage. Swap it. Put that guest of honor on your left. But you know how to justify it. You know how you're able to explain it. You would never want to break a rule without the explanation of why we do it this way, why that this is a gift, why this is a kindness. So anyway, that's how I got started in protocol all those many years ago. And then, again, going back to when I first said that I'm the perfect example of being in the right place at the right time and friend of a friend, same thing happened. Years go by, and then I've done protocol in different organizations. And I get a phone call from a friend of mine who says, Leslie, this is a job. Let's put your name on it. Now, this is April of 1996. Okay, April of 1996. And my friend says, Leslie, this job's got your name on it. And it's with an organization called the Washington Speakers Bureau. And their top speaker, not to be crass, but basically their golden goose at the time, the person taking care of him on the international speaking circuit is leaving, and they need to find somebody to take care of him. Him being General Colin Powell. And at the time I wasn't even job hunting, but this friend said, it's got your name on, they need you, they need you. And what had happened was the Washington Speakers Bureau, the woman who had been taking care of General Colin Powell for the first like 18 months he was on the speaking circuit. He retired from the military. He retired as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, top military position in the United States, arguably the world even. He had retired from the military. He'd written his first book, his autobiography, and he had entered the speaking circuit. And about 18 months into the speaking career, the girl who was at the Washington Speakers Bureau, who had been taking care of him, was leaving. And the co-founders of the Speakers Bureau went to General Powell and said, listen, your event manager's leaving. Tell us who you want us to hire. We will hire whomever you wish. Tell us who you want. God bless General Powell, because he said, no, you all have taken good care of me so far. I trust you to find the person. And so they spread the word around to other popular speakers, or other very active speakers on the speaking circuit. And former Senator Jack Kemp, who was also very, very popular on the speaking circuit, his chief of staff, basically his right arm, was a friend of mine, who was actually the husband of a friend of mine from all the years ahead in protocol, and she had been one of my immediate bosses. And this gentleman, Rick Ahern, told Harry Rhodes and Bernie Swain, the owners of the Speakers Bureau, founders of the Speakers Bureau, I know who it is you need, but let me call my wife, because I don't know how to call her. So let me call my wife. She'll find her. He called his wife, Pam. Pam called me and said, Leslie, they need you. Rick says they need you. And there you go. Now, the key to this was that I do not come from a military background. And there's a tendency to think of, when you think of a leader in the military, of needing that expertise. But the reason why I understood that they ended up offering me the job was that the general and I had two things in common, even though I didn't have the military background. Number one, we had both worked for President Ronald Reagan during the Reagan administration. And number two, despite the fact I did not have a military background, I had the protocol background. And protocol in military speak a common language in some ways, in terms of like there are right and wrong things. You go by the book. You follow procedure. You go for what is formal. You go for what is black and white. And you carry forward with leadership. And so that was, despite the fact I didn't come from the military, I don't speak the language of the military. They thought that those two things, we both worked for Reagan, and I spoke protocol, he spoke military, and that might be a common language that we could at least share. So they offered me the job, and the general and I did not know if we would work out. We had no idea. I certainly had no idea I would last a year, much less for the rest of his life and beyond even. But it turned out to be a magical adventure and chapter. And working with him on the international speaking circuit, I would have great fun sometimes when I would talk to my counterpart in a client. So I'm working with, say, the National Association of Speech Writers, and in working with my counterpart, and I could tell that person was a little bit intimidated about the idea of, oh my golly, I'm going to meet and have to take care of the great and glorious Powell, or Elvis. It was this.
I can imagine. That's how I would feel.
Exactly. And so after I would develop enough of a rapport on the phone, sometimes I would then, I wouldn't do it right away because it would be cruel if I did, but I would wait till I would hear a certain reverence in his or her voice, a little intimidation. But if I felt that I had developed enough of a rapport with the person, I would then say, well, every wonderful thing you've ever heard about General Powell, I would pause a beat, and I'd say, it's wrong. You could hear almost this audible gasp. at the other end. And then I would say, he's even better. And it was true. And then I would try to also to reassure the person that, please don't be nervous. You're going to have a wonderful time meeting him, but I will take care of him. I will make sure he's taken care of. You do not need to worry anything about him. I'll take care of him, but I will also help make you look great with your people and your bosses. You can shine because he will be happy. I can make General Powell happy, which will help make you shine with your bosses. But it'll also take the pressure off you in terms of trying to juggle all the balls that you have to keep in the air.
I want to take a quick break to invite you to download my free mini guide. It's called Stand Out or Step Aside, 5 Uncopyable Moves You Can Make Today. Download yours at beuncopyable.com/K. Now back to the show.
I want to just stop a little bit and go back to a couple things.
Oh, sure.
One thing that I have to say, moms everywhere, look at the power of a thank you note. When you said you were brought up to act a certain way and be polite, whatever considered, and you wrote thank you notes. Well, I know General Powell also was very religious about writing thank you notes. And like I said, for every mom who has made our kids write thank you notes, whether or not they do, those types of things matter. And also the fact that you got these references. People say, Leslie, you're perfect for this job. Well, you had a good network and these people thought really highly of you. I know in the book, we'll talk about this later, but of course, General Powell had very high standards for himself and for others. So I think that's really something that I think we could take away. Just who you know, how you treat them, writing thank you notes. Okay, that's
let me do a little plug about the thank you note business. My mother to this day, my 92-year-old mother to this day, credits a particular scholarship I received going to college that she made me. I suspected she had ingrained it in me enough that she wouldn't have had to make me do it. But anyway, she made me write thank you notes to this little organization that had given me a nice little scholarship. And it wasn't gigantic, but a little scholarship that for every semester. She made me write a thank you note. I didn't know who the people were, but just like to the, generically, the CEO of whatever this organization was. She made me write a thank you note. And don't you know, after the first semester, when I wrote the thank you note at the end of the semester, suddenly the scholarship increased. My mother to this day swears that it was because I wrote a thank you note. But anyway, thank you notes are very important. To include that General Powell, because his mama raised him right, I guess, but he just knew it in great. After every speaking occasion, after every speaking event, he would write a handwritten thank you note to the CEO of the organization for having invited him. And somebody would other speakers on the speaking circuit would say, why would you do that? They're paying you a lot of money. They should be thanking you.
right.
It doesn't matter. It does not matter. It is if the person, General Powell's philosophy was like, if the person, wanted to invite me to participate, to come into their world, I can thank them and I should thank them. And it would be just 2 or 3 sentences on a little card, handwritten, the day after in the mail. Without doubt.
And
And he
that
was-
is, yeah, that's
And he was
the prompt. Go ahead.
just as likely to write just a thank you note to just somebody who wasn't even the CEO, or might have been just somebody who you would not be somebody who would be in the headline. But he was always very kind that way.
And you said he treated everyone with the ultimate respect, no matter what political affiliation, and matter if they are the person opening the door or the CEO of the company. If there were some skeletons, we would be finding them out, but there aren't any. Except for the little twinkle in his eye, sense of humor that we'll talk about also, I hope. But
And the only time I've ever been in a car that went over 100 miles an hour.
only time you what at 100 miles an hour?
I've ever been in a car with somebody driving over 100 miles an hour.
I guess it's too late. They can't get him now, huh?
on a Dulles access road in the Corvette.
Just such an interesting, gracious, intelligent, this whole military, he loved that, the respect. And then, of course, he got into politics, all of that. He was just so consistent. And yet he had, like you said, I remember when we first got on, you said he was a little bit evil. Is that okay to include in the podcast?
Yep. So I'll just, because I'll explain this reason I use the word, because it's I don't mean it seriously, obviously.
I know.
Obviously, I don't mean it. But when we first started working together, and so taking care of General Powell on the international speaking circuit, what that meant is that everything I did had to be devoted to making him smart on the speaking circuit. So if, again, he's speaking to the National Speechwriters Association or, whatever the organization is, and he's going to be their keynote speaker, my job is to make him smart about that association, make him smart about that event itself, make him smart about the audience who will be sitting in the seat listening to him. So this speech is different from last week's speech because this is the donor, the donor class of this association, and the people in the audience for this group will be the big underwriters versus the group that would have been in the audience last week. It might have been like the people new to the industry. Also make him smart about what are the things that are pertinent to the industry right now. What are the highs and the lows in the economy that's affecting it? So this comes into my working with the client to give me all the information to make him smart, because he's beating up on me to make him smart about it. And I then write a briefing paper. I then give him all the collateral information. So I'm boiling it down to a briefing paper, but then I give him the raw material itself because he wants to read the annual reports. Whoever reads an annual report? I mean, the board of directors don't read annual reports. He reads the annual reports. And on top of that, he was a Google meister. He would then Google up so that he could find even more information. And then it became a battle between the two of us if he could find something that I hadn't been able to find. But he was a constant student. He always was trying to make himself as smart as he could, because he did not use a written speech ever. Now, when he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs or when he was the Secretary of State, clearly there are some policy issues that you could have a written speech and written bullet points and things. But on the international speaking circuit, no written speech. But it was because he would absorb it all, my briefing paper as well as all the other materials, in advance, so he could get up on stage and wow an audience. And so that when he's speaking to the audience hears the language they speak. He's able to put, if you wanted him to be your speaker, you were actually wanting General Powell to be General Powell. You wanted General Powell to be this phenomenal leader on your stage. But his gift to an audience was, okay, yeah, I'm Colin Powell, but I'm giving you the gift of, I know who you are and I know what's important to you. So yeah, my Colin Powell stories, but I can paint them in a way that is singing your song and speaking your language. But the reason why I made you gasp when I said, look, he was pretty evil when we first started working together. And that was because when first couple of days, I prepared him for whatever his speaking events are. And this is 1996. So mind you, we don't have cell phones at the time. I mean, they exist on the planet, but we don't have cell phones at work at the time. And we don't have email at the time. So really, we either talk on the phone or in person or by fax machine. So this first couple events go really, really well. I've heard back from my contact with the National Association of whatever, and the contact is delighted and pleased, and the CEO is delighted and pleased, and the 5,000 people in the audience, they're delighted and pleased. And so I'm a little big for my britches, and I come into my office thinking I've patted myself on the back. I've done a good job. And then I would get to the fax machine, And then on my fax would be a page or a page and a half of a fax that said to LL, Leslie, my initials LL, from CP, Colin Powell,
And I know this next part.
regarding RE, love note.
notes.
And then for the whole page, sometimes a page and a half, he would then go into detail about all the things I'd done wrong. And he would bullet it or he would number it in all caps. He would do a whole page and a half in all caps, telling me how I'd screwed up, all the things I'd done wrong. Going forward, Leslie, we will do it this way. No, we won't do it this way. And you know what you did? You said it's, he always did in the military clock, 1400, it means 2 o'clock, whatnot. And again, enough of the military. It doesn't come naturally. So of course, to me, 12:30 at night, midnight 30 is 24:30. Oh no. It's, not that at all. So anyway, it was painful. So whenever
how long did that go on? You mentioned that the beginning was a little rough, but you guys became such good friends.
So the thing, then he would turn this love note, and that was his way of trying to soften it, knowing he was pulling me through the ringer. And I read it and I'm mortified. Oh my golly, how could this be? I proud of myself. I think I've done a pretty good job, and how can this horrible man be finding fault in something as that the clouds came out, and it wasn't my fault, but the clouds came out. Well, anyway, as it turns out, this was the way he trained any new recruit, any new staff sergeant, any new lieutenant, anybody who worked for him. That was the way he trained them. So all the years go by, 25 and a half years go by, and especially during COVID, because as you can imagine, the speaking circuit is, so many arenas were really hurt during COVID shutdown. But for the events that, once we got past that first horribleness of COVID and been able to at least do some things, and suddenly the world has embraced Zoom, and you can do a lot of things on Zoom. So we would do some speeches by Zoom, and especially those last years or a year and a half, so many of his speaking engagements were, say, for like senior executive leadership programs where it's not necessarily the National Association of XYZ with 5,000 people in the audience. Now it's like organizations are really the senior level, the C-suite executives are having like a leadership training executive seminar, and they would want General Powell to give lessons on his wonderful leadership style. So during COVID, we would go ahead and do those speeches from the bunker, which is what we called the home office in the basement of his house, the bunker, and we would do it on Zoom. And when he would take questions from the CEO, saying, "So, sir, how did you were known for your leadership skills. How did you train your junior officers? How did you were known for having such a cohesive staff, whether it was the State Department or when you were 4-star or even, corporately? What's your secret to getting your staff so ingrained with you?" And he would always laugh, and he would say, "Well, listen, it's very simple. I would train my staff to start getting in," and he would do this with his fingers, "get in harmonic with me." And he would say, "If you've got to be in harmonic with me and just, work with my technique and my choreography. And the best way to do that is to train them fast and strictly right away." Then he would say, and this is all in front of the Zoom screen, he'd say, "But better than that, let me let Leslie tell you." And so I would always be right outside the camera screen, seated right over here, just outside of the camera range, seated right beside him, because that way I could always pass him notes in front, so that if saying you look at the camera or whatever, or pass him, so don't forget to say XYZ. So I'm literally seated right beside him. But he would, for this lesson, he would have me come, share the screen with him, and then I would do that whole shtick, and I would say, you know what? When we first started, he was mean and evil, and I hated. And then I would explain the love note system. So even I came to appreciate it. I mean, the first month or so, it was painful, but once we got through with it, and that was his plan, that was his plot. Once we got through it, it was, I've trained her. He would tease and he would say, periodically say, "You're not the boss of me." And it was always, that was the cue that he was saying, "Okay, yes, Leslie, you're in charge." But it was a way to train anybody working with him. It was a matter of getting them to sing from the same page of music, so to speak. So it was a love note system that he would tell the CEOs that if you've got new people coming in, frame them hard. Let them know your expectations down into the weeds. Split the hairs. But at least as soon as they learn it, they are your trusted aides.
You know, I want to take a break here. We talked about doing this in 2 parts. And before we close out, I do want to bring up Leslie's book again, My Time with General Colin Powell, Stories of Kindness, Diplomacy, and Protocol. Fascinating book. I told Leslie, I got a little overwhelmed, or more than a little overwhelmed. There's so much to cover, and so many of his wise sayings and his values, the way he treated everyone so well with so much respect, no matter who they were. I would like to close this part out. And then in the next conversation, Leslie, I want to talk a little bit more about you and how did you handle all this? Thank you so much for our conversation so far. I really appreciate it.
So much for letting me share.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Business. If you enjoyed it, please follow, rate, and review the show. And be sure to visit beuncopyable.com/K. Always remember, be uncopyable.